Alright, just finished installing this game. I've been looking forward to playing it all day. Well, game looks pretty beautiful, that's nice. Oh. I died. I guess that's bound to happen from time to time through the playthrough. Okay. Alright. Starting to get a little frustrated. Why does this game hate me? Why? Why, God, why?
Bro, you've been playing this for like 6 hours straight, man. I think, we should just take a break.
Don't worry about it. Just get out.
No, seriously, man, just take a break. Listen to some music.
No. Get out.
We could watch that anime some more, that'll take your mind off things, We'll be, that would be pretty awesome, dude. Good times,
I said get out!
Oh my God!
Hello and welcome to my Hyper Light Drifter review. I'm running out of exaggerated ways to say titles of video games. Shit, that means I'm gonna have to come up with real humor here soon. Oh, wait, still making the video. Back on topic. Anyway, Hyper Light Drifter is an indie game that I think deserves a lot of attention, so I wanted to do a quick little review on it, and let's go ahead and dig right into this game. So before I dig into this game for the review, let me add a little context as far as the genre and what Hyper Light Drifter is. Now, Hyper Light Drifter is the first game made by the Heart Machine Studios, which they are a new indie developer that I definitely have my eye on after playing this game. And this game was basically a very successful Kickstarter project to make a very retro-style adventure RPG. Now, it's more along the hardcore lines, but it is definitely an adventure RPG. Anyway, with that little bit of context added on, I will move right on into the production. Now, moving right down the chopping block of a review, let's talk about the production of Hyper Light Drifter. Now, Hyper Light Drifter is currently only on PC, but fear not, we are getting console versions of this game before the end of the year, so if you don't have a PC and you want to play this game, just hold tight, the Heart Machine's getting it to you. Now, moving right along, you're going to notice immediately that this game is bit-styled. When I say bit-styled, it has bit-style graphics from like the early days of gaming from the mid-80s to the late 90s, where everything's built up of small little pixels that basically build all of the environments together. Now, I preferably like this because to me it's more of like an artisan's choice to use a different and older medium to make a very stark and different artistic product. I've seen this done with filmmakers where they've chosen black and white film, 70mm film, and so on and so forth, just so they can have a different product that stands on its own as its own artistic piece. I'm completely okay with that. If you're not okay with bit style graphics, well, I don't think you should even look at this game because this game is not really trying to be groundbreaking with its graphics and production. It's just trying to emulate the retro style era of gaming. Okay, so moving right down the list of things to talk about with the production, let's talk about the amazing sound score of this game. Now, the reason I'm calling the sound score pretty fucking amazing is because A, it is amazing, and it fits well with everything you're doing, fits with the whole retro style, and does a lot to entrance you in the experience that you're playing. It would actually get me more into the mode with boss fights and other encounters and so on and so forth, because the music would go so well. And the music's built up of very simple beats to go along with the retro motif that this game has. And I really like that. So all in all, with that example clip, the music is pretty fucking great for this game. Now, on to my couple gripes for the production. Right off the bat, I did a 2-hour frame rate test of this game, and the game sits at 30 frames locked. Now, this is better than the frame rate going all over the place, don't get me wrong. The one reason I'm counting this as a very small gripe is simply because when you're playing a hyperactive game like this where you need to be very responsive and track yourself across the screen, the extra frames, if it were at 60 frames, does a lot to help you keep up with what's happening on screen and track your character better. So that's my one gripe. I wish that was better, but it's definitely way better than a skipping frame rate all over the place, and it is a solid frame rate. Though I do imagine that there were technical limitations in place using these older style of graphics and game processing and etc. to make the game look like it did while still staying retro style, so I guess it's kind of a trade-off. Now, moving on down the gripes list, I really don't like the mouse and keyboard controls. They aren't mapped well. Yes, you can adjust them, but the simple fact that the default controls aren't that great and the game's not really built for mouse and keyboard really tells you that you shouldn't play with a mouse and keyboard. Even at the beginning of the game when you first start playing, it says best played with a controller, and they're not kidding because the mouse and keyboard controls fucking suck. Okay, that was a bit harsh, but yeah, I would recommend playing with a controller, whether it's 360, Xbox One, or PS4. Just get a controller in your PC and play this game with that because the game clearly wants you to play with a controller. So those are my only real two gripes with the game's production. I could talk about the very nitpicky technical problems I had, but those would be very nitpicky and not even worth bringing up. I did have a couple of glitches, but the game's had pretty active support and they've been patching them like no tomorrow, so they're not even really worth bringing up. I'm going to call this game pretty technically solid from a technical standpoint because I had very few bugs and glitches, and the ones that did show up were very small and insignificant. Now beyond those two gripes, the last thing I can talk about is the length of this game. Now the average completion time for Hyper Light Drifter is around 9 to 11 hours. I say that because if you're good at this game and you only do a moderate amount of exploring and platforming, etc., that's the time that's going to take you to beat this game. Unfortunately, I'm not good at these types of games, so I have around 17 hours invested in this from failing on boss fights multiple times and exploring the maps as much as I could. So I definitely got my money's worth, but that's more or less my embarrassing mistake that I'm not particularly good at these kinds of games. But the average completion time is around 9 to 11 hours, and there is a lot extra for you to do in the game, so it does have replayability value. Now, with that covered, overall the production's really fucking great, from having retro-style graphics, a great sound score, and only a very few gripes that I have with it. Other than that, the game's pretty fucking awesome, production-wise. Okay, so moving on down the list, let's talk about the story. Now, anyone who watches my reviews on a regular basis knows that this is pretty ass-backwards for me because I usually cover the story last because I want to go into a lot of detail about it. Unfortunately, I can't go into a lot of detail about it because the story just doesn't have a lot to it, so I was just going to make it a quick little segment here, then we'll get to my favorite part, which is the gameplay. Okay, so let me start the story sum up by saying that I really like the story, I like how it's told, and I like a lot of the imagery in it. But I don't like how little context the game gives you. Now, I'm not one of those people that needs a shit ton of context on everything because I'm really good at analyzing what's happening in a game, movie, or book and translating the story to its actual meaning for myself. But Hyper Light Drifter honestly just didn't give me enough. Now, to go further into detail about this, the story's told with a lot of vague imagery of like different figures and stuff. You have a few cutscenes in the game, but the game never makes any effort to physically tell you anything that's happening. You're left to your own devices to figure it out. Which I am okay with for the most part. I just wish that the game made a little bit more of an effort to physically tell me what's going on. Like the Dark Souls series. Dark Souls doesn't openly go out and tell you what's happening, but there is a lore to be found and you can interact with other characters, find logs, and other stuff like that to tell you the story. So if they'd done that a little bit more, I would only have nothing but good things to say about the story. But unfortunately, as it sits, the story lacks context for me. Now let's go ahead and talk about the story sum up from what I could glean playing the game. Now, in this story, you play as the Hyper Light Drifter who's drifted through time and space to find a cure for his disease that's killing him throughout the whole track of this game. But the dimension that you showed up in, a godlike being basically showed up, destroyed all of the former titans of the realm, put new titans in place, which are going to be the different bosses that you fight throughout the game, and basically caused mass genocide and reset everything in this universe. And you basically fight all of these titans to basically cure yourself and set the order of the realm back to the way that it was. And that's all I could really glean from the story. Not a lot to it, I could get it enough, but again, I wish there was just a little bit more context to it. Okay, so moving on to my favorite part of the game, the gameplay. Now, I really like the gameplay because it proves that you can have extremely simple gameplay, but still have it be engaging, rewarding, punishing, encouraging of exploration, and everything encompassed in that region. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and dig right into this gameplay. So now, let me give a fair disclaimer. This game's hard, because when I first started playing it, I didn't think it was going to be that hard. I just thought it was going to be a good, fun, adventure-style RPG. Oh, no. I was completely wrong in that field. Imagine Demon Souls in an overhead retro-style game, and then that gives you Hyper Light Drifter. Just imagine that, because that's the kind of game that you're playing. And while the Souls games work with, it's hard but it's fair, this one works with, it's hard but it's never impossible. So if you don't have a good patience for hard games, or hard games aren't your motif, or you don't want to play super hard games like this, I recommend that you skip it because this game is definitely not for the weak. So the first thing I really want to talk about with the gameplay is the platforming. Now I really like the platforming because it's simple, but it's not easy. Simply because all of the platforming in this game is reliant upon your dash ability. Now you have to use your dash to basically chain dash across and basically get across different platforms to either find items, do a challenge area, or get further on in the game. Now I really like this because you physically had to account for how far your dash was gonna go and where you were dashing from to make it, or if your chain dash after you unlock it was gonna be good enough for you to get across. So it definitely made you think about platforming, but it wasn't super hard platforming. Next up is the level design. Now I really like the level design because it does have a few really hard puzzles that either have you dashing through an area or having to go around somewhere that you think you're not going to make it and you make it and find a really good item, or basically finding invisible platforms to get to a secret item. So the level design is really cool in the sense that it takes you across the main track of the game, but also gives you a whole bunch of little branching side paths to reward your exploration, and I really like that. Now the last thing I want to talk about before I get to the meat of this gameplay, which is the boss fights and combat, I want to talk about the skill system. Now the skill system is good in the sense that it's really complex. How the skill system works is you will find skill points, and after you collect 4 of them, you will get a skill token. You use these skill tokens to basically buy different abilities for your character. Now, fair warning, you're not physically going to become stronger with skill points that you can carry more health packs, upgrade your weapons, get extra weapons, and basically find different combat techniques. But you will never physically become stronger as a character in this game. You will remain at the same 5 hit bar as you play through the whole game. Then when you do New Game Plus, you get a 2 hit bar. I basically sum this up to you're basically mastering your craft, but you're not physically becoming stronger. Like, you're becoming a more skilled and valuable warrior, but you're not physically becoming a big roided out dude that can just power through areas. So let's talk about the bulk of the gameplay, the combat. I really like the combat because it's very simple, has simple roots, but it subtly gets harder and more complex. Now the difficulty in this game is crushing from the start, but you'll feel yourself get better at certain areas as you spend time there because you learn the different enemy strategies and their patterns and how to fight them. And this also plays into the fact that you will be able to upgrade yourself to carry more health packs, get more slash abilities, and do more out in the field as a character, but you will never physically become stronger as a character. So every enemy will remain a real and constant threat to you because if you're not paying attention, a simple grunt enemy can kill you just as easily as a boss in this game, which creates very real and frantic combat scenarios when you're having to take on massive hordes of enemies or sit there and just hit the wall as you try to figure out the right strategy to take down a boss. And ultimately, this was really cool because I physically saw myself become more of a badass as the game went on. Because I didn't physically get stronger, I just honed in my craft in different fields. I unlocked more firearms, I got more dash abilities, I unlocked different sword techniques. I was physically able to do more as a character, but I wasn't stronger as a character, which is the biggest selling point of the combat in this game. And that's why I feel the combat's as crushing and as hard as it is. Now, as you progress through different areas, you'll collect these little triangle pieces, and once you collect 4, you beat the area, but once you collect 3, you can fight the boss of an area. Now, you're going to have to get 4, but if you want to take a break from an area, you can get 3, fight the boss, and come back to it later, which I did for a couple areas. Now, let's talk about the boss fights. Now, fair warning, I am going to have to show boss fight footage here, and if you haven't played this game, it's better if you experience these bosses blind, so I'm going to put up a little timestamp so you can skip it if you want to. Okay, now that you've had your spoiler alert, let's go ahead and talk about the boss fights in this game. Now, I absolutely love the bosses because almost all of them are really hard. There was one boss that was average, and because he's an average boss fight, he feels easier than the rest. But the simple fact of the matter is all of the bosses have drastically different strategies and combat techniques, meaning you're going to have to do extremely different things to fight them. What works with one boss isn't going to work with another boss, and their health bar will intimidate you when you go fight them, simply because of how many blocks you have to take out in a row to beat them. But the game does reward you for killing the boss because they will drop 3 skill points, which will almost give you a whole new skill token for upgrading. My one little gripe with this is that I wish that they gave you 4 so you got 1 skill token from being the boss. That would make it feel just a tad more rewarding, but nothing feels better than killing yourself on a boss 50 times in a row, figure out that strategy to absolutely own his ass and get through there with little to no hits or come out unscathed, or basically just survive an onslaught of a boss strategy. The simple fact is that the bosses will give you a run for your money, and they are definitely bosses in the sense of the word. Okay, with the boss fights covered, let's talk about the few gripes I have of this game. Now, let me go ahead and say that Hyper Light Drifter was one of those games where I'd have to go out of my way to find stuff wrong with it, which immediately tells me that this is a really good game simply because I'm having to think long and hard about it. The problems aren't glaring, they're very small and subtle problems for the gameplay. So without further ado, let's talk about the few problems I have with the gameplay. Right off the bat, we have that whole boss fight skill point thing that I told you about. My one gripe with this is that when you kill a boss, you only get 3 skill points instead of 4. I would have liked it if the boss actually gave me a skill token rather than almost giving you a skill token. It would have given me a little bit more of a reward and encouraged me to sit there and dump more time into these boss fights than I did in certain play sessions, simply because I feel like I would get almost a whole upgrade from each boss. Then moving on down the list, there's the 30 locked frames per second. Now overall this is extremely small, but for a game like this I feel like 60 would really help it, simply because you're moving all over the place and having to track your character everywhere. So it definitely would have helped me a lot if it had more frames, simply because you are having to be hyperactive, interacting with everything as fast as possible, and just being in tune with everything that's happening on the screen. Again, would have made it a little bit easier for me, but overall, not a major problem. And then my last gripe with this game that is a bit of a big gripe is the mini game where you get to play soccer with this little kid for a skill point. Just feels really lazy and thrown in there to artificially add more to the game. I say this because it feels really weird playing this. The game doesn't feel designed for you to play soccer with this little kid that can fucking tackle you. And it just doesn't go well with the rest of the theme of the game and how the gameplay works. It feels like a very lazy afterthought to give you an extra skill point. If that skill point was out in the level, somewhere for me to go find it, I would go find it. But the simple fact that I have to sit here and play soccer with this little fucking punk, okay, I'm calm, makes me not want to do it because there's no gameplay aspects developed for it. It just feels like a very lazy add-on. But beyond those gripes, I actually had an amazing time with the gameplay because it's so well developed and you have to go out of your way to find things wrong with it. Yes, I have a few noteworthy gripes that I brought up, but other than those gripes, the gameplay feels almost absolutely perfect. It's challenging and encourages exploration to find extra health packs and skill tokens. The platforming is well done. The combat's some of the best I've seen in an adventure RPG. It's just all done very well, and I have a hard time finding things wrong with it, which is why the gameplay's pretty fucking awesome overall. So now's the point in the review where I'm going to take everything that I've just said about the game and put it together for a verdict and opinion on the game. Opinion-wise, this game is fucking phenomenal for me. I'm in absolute love with it. I can honestly recommend it to anyone who's in the market for a good adventure-style RPG, simply because the game's just near perfect. It does almost everything phenomenally. The art is amazing, the storytelling is solid but could use a little bit more context, the sound score is amazing, the gameplay's absolutely phenomenal, the boss fights are challenging but rewarding. It does almost everything perfectly, which is why I'm going to have to give Hyper Light Drifter a 9.75 out of 10. And it's honestly a phenomenal $20 value, and if the story had just a tad more context, I would give it the full 10 out of 10 verdict. And this has honestly put the Heart Machine on my list of indie developers to watch. Now that's been my opinion on the game. Let me know if you agree or disagree with it. If you have anything else you want to talk to me about game-wise with this, let me know in the comments. I will get back to you as soon as possible. But overall, I do recommend that you pick up this game because it is a phenomenal $20 value. And I hope to see you bitches in whatever video I do next. Bitches. By the way, it's tagline. I'm not meaning to insult people. Just so you know. Bitches.